Hi, everyone, and welcome to our DGTO check-in webinar with the Office for the Arts. I'd firstly like to acknowledge the country on which we meet. Today, I come to you from the land of the Kombu-Meri families of the Ugambe language region, and I invite you to think on whose land you are residing on from your location. Sovereignty was never ceded, and the lands have always been and always will be Aboriginal land. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and extend my welcome to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. So, welcome. For those who don't know me, my name is Jens, and I work as Director of Industry Member Relations at IGEA. And if this is your first interaction with IGEA, then welcome. We are the Interactive Games and Entertainment Association, and we are the peak industry body for the video games industry here in Australia. All right, so the DGTO has been live for a couple of months now. In today's webinar, we will be checking in with the Office for the Arts and how things are going. What are some things to avoid? What are some common mistakes that they may have seen now that some of the first applications have gone in, and so on. And in addition, you'll get another opportunity to ask any DGTO-related questions. In fact, we've given you an opportunity to do that before this webinar, so we received a couple of questions in writing that were a bit more in-depth, and we wanted to give our friends at the Office for the Arts an opportunity to sort of look into that and prepare the answers for that. However, you'll also get an opportunity to ask some questions live, like last time. And like last time, the Office for the Arts was so kind as to, again, send their best and brightest. So please welcome Penny Sherburne and Jason Podkins to this webinar. They will give us an update on where things are at, and then, as said, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. Now, if you would like to do that, as usual, please use the Q&A function at the bottom. You see that there at the bottom of the screen, Q&A. The advantage of using that function is that we are able to keep track of your questions. If you did that in the chat function, it would be a bit of a challenge. We can mark questions as answered and so on. So, Penny, Jason, thank you very much for making yourself available again. And, well, over to you. And in fact, before I do that, I'm just going to make you co-host. You can share your screens. All right. There we go. Over to you. Don't commit with power.
That's right. Thanks, Jens. So for people who don't know me, I'll just reintroduce myself. I'm Jason Podkins. I head up the Screen Incentive section here in the Office for the Arts. I'm primarily responsible for screen production policy in Australia. That includes film, television, and of course digital games. We also administer 3 of the offsets in the section. So that's including the digital games tax offset, which obviously we're going to talk about today. I'll just hand over to Penny just to introduce herself, and then we'll get the presentation started.
Thanks, Jason. My name's Penny. I am in Jason's team, and I look after the digital games tax offset. So if you're submitting your applications, popping in any questions to the digital games tax offset mailbox, you're going to probably be talking to me. So anything you need, reach out.
Yeah. So Penny's the expert. I'm just a figurehead. But we'll start with the presentation. As Jens said, we're just going to give you a very broad outline of things that we've spotted during the first couple of months of the digital games tax offset. It still is very early in the piece. We've had quite a few applications, but obviously we're kind of building our knowledge and kind of coming across issues as we go. But yeah, we just thought we'd kind of give you a high level overview. So first things first, just to give you, for those of you who may not know, but a quick refresher on what the digital games tax offset actually is. It's a refundable tax offset that allows eligible companies that develop digital games in Australia to claim 30% of their total qualifying Australian development expenditure. The legislation and the digital games tax offset commenced from 1 July 2022, so the legislation and its introduction applied retrospectively. And the rebate is capped up to a limit of 20 million per company or group of companies per income year. Again, there's certificates that are available in 3 broad streams. That's the completion certificate, which is for new games on release and once it's made available to the public. The second is the porting certificate, which is moving a game obviously from one platform to another platform, so you can claim for eligible expenditure under that. And the third is the ongoing development of a game. So an annual certificate for work done across the slate of release eligible games or just one game, depending on the structure of your company after the game's release. Thanks, Penny. So just to kind of get into, what the kind of some of the trends that we've seen to date, we have received quite a large number of provisional certificates. So provisional certificates, I suppose, is the upfront process that people can go through to check whether or not they're actually eligible to receive one of the certificates under the digital games tax offset. So we're just going to kind of clarify the provisional certification is entirely optional. You don't have to go through it. We realize that in the early days of the offset, many companies will choose to do so, and that's absolutely not a problem. But you should just have a couple of kind of qualifiers to that. First of all, it doesn't guarantee that the minister will issue a final certificate. You still must maintain your eligibility criteria from the time of your provisional application through to your final application. And it doesn't speed up or streamline the actual assessment of the final application. All it does is probably gives you comfort that at the time of your application, the game that you are developing or the game that you've released is eligible for the digital games tax offset. But remember, that's a point-in-time process. You can apply for a provisional certificate for a game before or during development, so you don't actually have to be kind of incurring all of the costs or have incurred all the costs. And like I said, it just provides an indication of whether the game is likely to be eligible for the digital games tax offset. And again, it's at that point in time, which is based on the information provided at that stage. The main reason why obviously lots of companies are asking for provisional certificates is they want to seek assurances about the eligibility of game. Completely understandable. It's a new offset, it's a new scheme. People are still kind of feeling their way through it and just double checking that they will be eligible. Or it might be required by lenders as part of the financing process, for example, to underscore loans or guarantee loans, for example. Next slide, please. So just to outline, because there's some confusion among some applicants around the certification timeframe and when you can claim for the ATO. So in respects of certifying a digital games tax offset claim or rebate, so the process of assessing an application, including consideration by our advisory board, which is made up of 2 industry experts and a senior member of the department, will take probably or may take approximately 16 weeks. Okay, so it is quite an involved process from the time the application is received, then it's registered, it's initially assessed for eligibility, it's then sent out to one of our, well, usually it would be sent out to one of our assessment companies to actually dig into the expenditure that you're claiming. Then it comes back to us, then it goes to the board, and by that time, you've probably chunked up most of those 16 weeks quite easily. After that, the minister then will consider whether or not to issue a certificate. And again, this time frame is associated with that. Normally, at least 2 to 4 weeks, from when we've actually briefed the minister or sent the certificate to the minister to be assessed. So you should build that into any plans that you've got. It does take quite some time to certify a digital games tax offset. As I've kind of outlined before, for those of you who may have attended previous seminars, the advantage of that is that because we are so, I suppose, forensic in our analysis of expenditure, the ATO rarely audit or then double check the certification. Normally just accept it as is, and we've never seen the ATO actually amend or revise the certificate after we've provided one. In terms of the ATO process, the Australian Taxation Office process, one certificate is issued, it's then claimed through your company's relevant income tax return. Okay, so if you're waiting for certification when your tax return is actually due, seek a deferment from the ATO, and then you can wait for the certificate to come in and then put it in as part of your claim. Next slide, please. Just a refresher again, just to make sure that people are aware of what the eligible games are. Obviously, we will get kind of threshold cases and case-by-case basis, but an eligible game broadly must be available through the internet that is publicly released. available to the general public for entertainment or educational purposes, and it must be interactive, being the sequence of events is determined by the player choices. Okay, so it must meet those criteria. A game is ineligible if it's primarily developed for industrial, corporate, or institutional purposes. So normally games that are developed for a business-to-business purpose are normally not eligible for the digital games tax offset. The game is ineligible if it's primarily developed to advertise or promote a product, entity, or service. If it's refused or unable to attain classification, or is a gambling service or contains gambling-like elements. That doesn't mean that, for example, all loot boxes are excluded. It just means that if there are random-based mechanics within your game which then provide a real-world value as a direct consequence of the game, you are likely to fall under that clause at the end. Next slide, please. So we did seek some application feedback from our assessors in terms of what they've seen to date in terms of, I suppose, not common mistakes. Mistakes is the wrong word, but issues or things that they may go back to companies on as part of the application process and part of the assessment process. So the first thing that they often need to seek is around wages and apportionment, the apportionment time. Please keep details about how the amount has been calculated. Provide timesheets where you can, activity logs and tasks as evidence. Okay, so quite often companies, as we flagged, will need to maintain really accurate records as to how and when they've incurred wages and apportioning of the time of developers across projects. Okay. The other request is for payroll reports. Please provide a full payroll report with all employees, not just those connected to the project. Okay, because sometimes that can be material to the application. And also provide activity reports detailing the components of the payroll. So long service leave, bonuses, termination payments, any other kind of payroll activity. Work cover is another issue which we often kind of see and adjust. So, please provide a rationale for the calculation, the provision of the premium notice, and the annual rateable remuneration declaration, which is a mouthful when you're reading it this way. And also provide evidence of bonuses and when they're paid and what they're actually paid for. Okay, so that's absolutely key because some general bonuses can't be included, but bonuses that relate to the specific project or production that you might be working on, or the game that you're working on can be. So we would need a confirmation letter around that. Next slide, please. Even more application feedback is around contractors. So please provide contracts, invoices, evidence of work, confirmation of the contractors that work has been completed by them in Australia, which is extremely important because we only will allow expenditure which is incurred in Australia and not further outsourced. So no secondary outsourcing by that company. We do ask, or our assessors will ask you to fill in a template for information, the general ledger template it's called. And basically we will ask you to fill out the first incurred, last incurred, and the location columns, obviously, so that we can kind of get an assessment of when the activity occurred and who was working on the activity when and where. Separating the fringes and the wages by the employees so that it's very clear how that is being calculated, and separating contractors by individual contractors or entities and companies. Okay, next one. Also, another one which we're seeing quite a lot of is adjustments around influential employees, particularly things like directors of companies and those kind of things. So if you could just provide a statement as to who may or may not be considered as influential in your company and the reasons why or why not. Not just on the company, but obviously pertaining to the development of the game itself as well. And also finally, just an explanation and a statement identifying all shareholders and links with the company. This is related to the related parties and the various aspects of the DGTO that pertain to that. Next slide, please. And finally, we did reach out to our colleagues in Treasury, where the Office of Small Business, so they have a small business section. We do recognize that quite a lot of companies are probably, obviously we have a broad range of people applying for the DGTO, from very small micro businesses, maybe only 1 or 2 employees, through to small businesses, medium businesses, and of course, very large enterprises with large resources and kind of payroll functions and corporate functions. For those that are at the smaller end of the scale and may need support just around the more broader business activity and kind of helping them actually establish themselves as small business in order to actually claim the DGTO, there's a lot of support and a lot of resources out there. I've got a bit of a list there in terms of where you can go to and what's available to you. The Digital Solutions Program, which is part of the Australian Small Business Advisory Services Program, and that works with small businesses to make the most of digital tools and provides a lot of free advice. Other programs that you can access as well are also listed there, and the key websites is the business.gov.au and the ato.gov.au as well. Those can really provide you a lot of support in terms of setting up your company, setting up the appropriate structures to make sure that when you do apply for the DGTO, it's as straightforward as it possibly can be. And that's it for the presentation. Hopefully it was a quick overview in terms of lessons learned, because like I said, we've only been in existence for a couple of months. But yeah, we're more than happy to answer questions now from the
Excellent.
audience.
And questions, we have a couple. The first one from an anonymous attendee is, does the ATO review the expenditure, or does the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, Communications and the Arts? What happens if companies overclaim relevant expenses?
So look, just going back to the assessment process under the Digital Games Tax Offset, applications for the Digital Games Tax Offset are assessed by the Office for the Arts. In fact, you're looking at one of the assessors there, Penny Sherburn. There's a new member of the team today, James Marsh, he's there as well. So basically, Penny and James will assess the applications. We do then go through that very rigorous assessment process. So we register it, we check it for basic eligibility. It's then passed to one of our assessment companies. There's 2 assessment companies that work with us, and they forensically go through the general ledger, the payroll, and all of the expenses that you're claiming under the Digital Games Tax Offset. They will remove any ineligible expenditure. Sometimes they will add in expenditure that maybe they think you're eligible for but haven't actually claimed, which is why it's important to give all of your records rather than just the subset that you think pertains to that project. And then once that's done, it's assessed by our board and then given to the minister. That assessment process, which essentially means all applications are not just checked, but double checked, and in often cases triple checked, means that the ATO does not normally do their own assessment on our productions, on our certificates. It's different to the R&D incentive, for example, where often that's kind of done almost on a claims basis, on a self-assessment basis, and then the ATO will audit it. This is the exact opposite. We will do the assessment, we do the certificate, and then the ATO will probably never audit it. Hope that answered the question.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jason. There's another question here regarding the game being ineligible. Does the game have to have a classification from the Australian Classifications Board, or would something like PEGI, i.e. the European classification, or another classification be fine?
So a game has to be classifiable. Under the legislation, the wording is that a game has to be classifiable, meaning that it can't include any elements that may render it unclassifiable in Australia. So practically speaking, no, it does not need to be classified in Australia. An overseas classification is fine. An IARC classification is fine. Where, in circumstances where if we were looking at a game and we were a bit concerned about elements of the game, It may be the case that we asked for a game to be classified by the Australian Classification Board, but that would be by exception and only on the basis of concerns.
And Penny plays or watches somebody play every single game that applies for the DGTO, by the way. That's the benefit of the job.
If you walk past my desk, you think I just watch YouTube all day.
She keeps on getting pinged by the department about why you're trying to look at this game place, you know, this gaming website. It's very unusual. So, anyway.
We have a question here regarding the GL template. Where's that available?
So that is linked as part of the application form. It's embedded in the application form as you're going along. There's then a link to it. But there have been a couple of questions about this, so I might actually this week move a copy to our arts.gov.au webpage as well, because clearly it's a bit hard to find, and sorry about that.
That's all good. Feel free to shoot a copy through me as well, and I can put it up on our website too. An anonymous attendee has a question regarding any exclusions to eligible employees, for example, when they take leave or receive termination payments. They need to be listed then.
That's a good question.
Excellent. That sounds like one for me, Jason. Absolutely. So there are some exclusions legislatively. QAID, or Qualifying Australian Development Expenditure, relates to employees performing actual work on the game. So there are some technical challenges or technicalities around, you know, employees who go on long periods of leave, long service leave or maternity leave, and to what degree their salaries can be claimed as eligible QAID in terms of how they can be linked to, you know, the actual development of the game. There was a second part to that question, Jens, and I've already forgotten it. Memory of a goldfish.
So the question is regarding eligible employees, what happens when they take leave or receive termination payments?
Excellent. I knew there was a second part. So termination payments wouldn't be eligible QAID because it's not related to the development of the game. It's sort of seen as more of a broader company expense.
Great. Thank you very much. This is a very good question. Does this actually conflict with the R&D grant, and what relationship do they stand with each other?
So unusually in the offset space, you can actually apply for both. Okay, so long as you don't double dip. So basically, as long as you don't claim expenditure under both the R&D and the digital games tax offset, you can claim for both offsets. Normally, and this is normally, offsets are mutually exclusive, so you can only apply for one. But in this case, you can actually apply for the R&D and then apply for the digital games tax offset, but you must make sure that any expenditure you're claiming isn't claimed under both of the offsets.
And I think for, you know, ease for application processing for, you know, myself and my team and the assessors, if you have accessed the R&D tax incentive for a game where you're also accessing it for the DGTO, we ask in the application form that you do declare that, so absolutely do. But also potentially include a bit of an explanation, whether it's just a bit of a Word document that you put together and then put in as an attachment. Explain what you've claimed, or, you know, sort of provide some sort of assurance of certainty, explanation, narrative to give us the comfort that there hasn't been that double dipping. But, you know, declaring it in your application form does have the effect of a tax declaration. So if it is not true, that is tax fraud.
Ooh, don't want that. All right, we have another question here from an anonymous attendee. Can we lodge directly with the Office for the Arts, or do we need to go through an external party / consultant?
So you lodge directly with the Office of the Arts. Just go to our arts.gov.au website and then follow the links to the various screen incentives, and the digital games tax offset is linked under there. And then you'll be directed to what's called our Smarty Grants portal, which is basically the application process, the formal application process. So you can lodge directly through there. You don't need to go through a third party. Sometimes we recommend, obviously, that you could use, you know, a tax accountant to help you kind of develop your application, but normally you would apply directly to the Office for the Arts themselves. As I talk to myself in the third person.
You can do it. All right. Ambitious question here. Is there a possibility that the $500,000 threshold will be lowered in the near or foreseeable future? If so, how soon can we expect this?
That would be that's a big question, a very difficult question. Look, unlikely in the very short to medium term, because obviously the offset has just got through Parliament. Obviously, it was a bit of a fight to get the offset out. Offsets traditionally are, obviously the government is very supportive of games development, but they're quite expensive. So, kind of they do take a bit of money. But I mean, look, saying that, and just, obviously not in terms of the threshold, as we're getting more and more applications, we are sometimes seeing technicalities under the Act, different things that we want to change or changes in the Act. So, we will kind of do a rolling basis go forward, revisiting some of those policy issues or those policy assumptions that we had in the first place. We're always open to discussions. We're always open to the argument about why we should move the thresholds. But at the moment, I think it's a bit too early days to kind of say, let's drop the threshold and drop more people.
Fair enough. Give these people a chance. Do services provided and expenses incurred in lieu of equity in the company qualify as expenditure for the DGTO?
That's a good question. We might have to take on notice, I think, Penny.
Yes, because some of those words I don't know, so always a good sign. If you could shoot that through, or if whoever asks the question wants to get in touch, digitalgames@arts.gov.au, shoot through the question, and Jason and I will apply our shared brain, and hopefully we can come back with a decent answer.
Once we've looked in the dictionary for the word. Okay.
All right, thank you. So next question, are games that are partially developed overseas eligible for the DGTO? For example, half the team is in Canada and the other half is in Australia. Can the DGTO be claimed?
Yes, absolutely, as long as you don't claim any overseas expenditure. So as long as you're only claiming for the development work and the game is, so as long as the game meets all of the eligibility criteria, the digital games tax offset, but eligible and ineligible games, you can absolutely, I suppose, have a game which is developed in more than one country, claim for the DGTO, so long as you're only claiming for the Australian development aspects. So you can't claim any Canadian expenditure under the DGTO, but you can claim your expenses here in Australia.
Fair enough. At the end of the day, we're not doing this to support Canada. No offense, Canada. If all the bookkeeping is handled through Xero grant reporting and managed by an accountant, would that cover most requirements for reporting? Very efficient thinking.
It's a good question. I'm not familiar with that particular kind of software, but look, normally most accountants, knowing that you would apply for the digital games tax offset, would get your accounts in order to enable you to do so, or to allow you to do so. So look, without kind of giving you a cast iron guarantee, it's certainly a sensible approach to have a kind of accounting software and payroll software, and also to use an accountant to help you actually prepare for the DGTO and submit and help you submit the DGTO application.
Very good, thank you. Pretty wide-reaching question. What common challenges do companies face when applying for this tax offset, and how can they be mitigated? I guess you already covered some of those in the slides.
We covered some of those. Look, it depends on the size of the company and the structure of the company. Obviously, if you're a very small company, we are aware of the kind of the saying in the industry that once you get a HR function, the soul of your company dies. We are the destroyers of your soul, of your company, unfortunately, because we do demand, HR and payroll records. But yeah, certainly for very small micro businesses, it's the accurate record keeping. It's actually going from I'm developing my game, on a very small scale basis to a larger game. where I need to keep quite accurate records in order to actually justify my expenditure. For the larger ones, is tracking the expenditure, which may be across several projects, apportionment, those kind of aspects, which are kind of the challenge. There's always a challenge. I think it's probably fair to say across all of the offsets that we deal with, once you've gone through the process once, it's 10 times easier the second time, and then 10 times easier again the third time. It just becomes easier. It's always kind of, the process is quite new. We try and make it as non-confrontational as possible in terms of actually, kind of administrative burden, but it is obviously a big ask to justify, kind of $500,000 or more of expenditure. Obviously, we're talking about relatively large amounts of money there and large amounts of rebates. So we do want you to justify it. But like we say, once you go through that process, then it gets a lot easier, because then suddenly you kind of know, yeah, I've done this before, I know what I'm doing.
And I'll probably just add in, that's absolutely probably the biggest challenge. Another challenge I think I'm seeing from sort of processing applications is sometimes companies just quite haven't hit the mark in terms of what they've applied for. They've clearly been a little bit confused between the different certificate types and potential eligibility, which is completely understandable. It's a brand new program, and it is, in some elements, quite a confusing program. So I'd probably just say, in terms of, making it easier on yourself, if you're looking at the guidance material in the application form and you know exactly what you're doing, go for it, you do you. But if you have any questions, if you're uncertain, if you're not sure you're eligible, if it's all a bit confusing, get in touch. I'm, here to help, happy to talk through, and it is easier for me, easier for you, I think, if we kind of get on the same page before you submit your application, rather than try and work it all out as sort of once it's already in and we kind of have to try and retrofit it.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Knowing issues or questions up front is absolutely, the easiest way to go about it, because then everybody can be really, quite aware of what the situation is. What we don't want to do is kind of find an issue halfway through your application, go back to you, and then that delays the process, because, you have to come back to us, and et cetera, et cetera. So really, if you have got confusion, or if you need guidance or help, we're here to help.
Yeah, thank you. And as you can see, they are indeed very friendly people. I mean, apart from this whole soul-destroying thing, but, in the grand scheme of things.
That's just a principle.
Are superannuation payments and payroll tax eligible?
Super, yes. Payroll tax, no, because it's a company expense rather than associated with an individual.
Nice, that was straightforward. Associate salaries are limited to the first $65,000. Is this per year or per certificate?
Great question. It's per year. So if you were applying for multiple certificates for your company in the same year, it would be $65,000. You could only claim $65,000 across all the certificates for the sum of the year.
Excellent, thank you. How soon can we start applying? The applications only open on the 1st of July 2024.
No. I mean, I'm doing stuff. So we are open for applications. You can come in now, just on the arts.gov.au webpage. So they've been open since about July 2022, and you can apply on a rolling basis. As soon as your game has either been completed, you can apply for your completion certificate, or at the end of your financial year, you can apply for your ongoing development certificate. Come on in. I need things to do.
Yeah. But yeah, just to reinforce it, it's 1 July 2022, which is the commencement of the offset. So all expenditure from that date can be claimed. Well, not all expenditure, or eligible expenditure from that date can be claimed. And obviously, yeah, applications are open now, but you can't claim from before 1 July 2022.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep Penny busy, especially for Christmas. How do loans from directors work? Do they count?
Again, that's a good question that we might take on notice. I mean, look, we have come across financing arrangements in both the games industry and obviously, in the film and television industry as well. They're very common. But I think it depends on the nature of the loan, how it's being used, and and what the kind of the the requirements are of the loan and what it's trying to do. So yeah, we obviously have, you know, arm's length tests and other kind of tests in the legislation, but yeah, I think we would probably dig a bit deeper there and probably look at it on a very specific circumstances in terms of that actual application itself.
Thank you very much. Coming back to the $500,000 threshold, what's the best way for people to submit their opinion that the $500,000 threshold for the DGTO should be lowered? Is there a contact form or email address where this could be submitted, or should we be contacting our local members? Now, before I hand over to you, let me just say, feel free to talk to us. That is literally our job, to advocate for these things. Talk to our policy team, reach out to me. We can have a conversation as to best go about it. You know, it's one thing to voice an opinion, but it's then another of, you know, backing it up. Why should it be lowered, and so on, supply context and all that stuff, so that, you know, there is a constructive argument to be put forward. But what do you say, Jason and Penny?
So look, I certainly say contact IGEA. I would certainly say reach out to your local member. That's not a problem whatsoever. Just bear in mind, when you write to the local member, the poor person who's going to write the response is Penny Sherburn, who's in your top right of your corner there. But look, certainly, you know, we're always open to feedback. You can contact us directly as well, you know. But you know, what we always say as well is what I would add as well is, you know, for games that are below 500,000, we've got quite a few directly funded programs through Screen Australia that kind of address those smaller games before they reach that threshold, and they're looking to develop those smaller games before they reach that threshold. That's kind of Screen Australia's remit, which is, you know, to kind of develop games within that budget, and then not really kind of provide too much funding to those which are going to go over that.
Yeah, thank you very much. But yeah, look, in all seriousness, if you feel very strongly about this, certainly have a conversation with us. As I said before, that's clearly within our remit to put forward the voice of the industry towards government stakeholders. Another question we have here about minority foreign ownership. Does that affect eligibility at all?
No, it doesn't affect eligibility. So yes, you can have foreign ownership within a company. You can be a subsidiary of a foreign company. So long as your expenditure for that specific game is incurred in Australia and meets the eligibility criteria, then it doesn't matter who owns you or who actually have, you know, kind of your company structure per se. It's because the digital games tax offset is on a project by project basis rather than a company by company basis. Okay, so, you know, obviously we look at a slate of projects when we're doing things like ongoing development, but you're still looking at several projects by one company, and really the company is another factor beyond the offset.
Great, thank you. All right, another question here. Is it possible to initially apply for an ongoing development certificate with a crate of $500,000 and then apply again the following year under the same certificate with an additional expenditure of only $100,000, or does each certificate require a minimum of $500,000 in crate?
So for the ongoing development, it is $500,000 per. Oh, is that right, Penny? $500,000 per income year?
Trust yourself, Jason. You've got this. That's correct.
I've got that. God, I was just like, yeah. Well, it's late in the day. But yeah, so unfortunately, yes, it is. I mean, look, you know, certainly, you know, you will need to look at what ongoing development you're doing over what time frame. But yeah, unfortunately, the thresholds are 500,000 per income year. But just remember, it's not just one project. Okay, so it can be more than one project, can be bundled up into that certificate to kind of get you closer to the threshold if you need to.
Excellent, thank you. Somewhat related to that, someone is asking if a game is being developed and released this year, but under $500,000, and it's being serviced over the next year or so, which one should we apply for? Which certificate should we be applying for? The new game or the live game certificates?
So look, if you haven't released your game yet, okay, and you should apply for a completion certificate once you have released it, remembering that the threshold is $500,000, okay? If you then have subsequent ongoing development after that point, that's where the ongoing development comes in. Now, when you release the game, at which point in the development process, remembering that there's no time limit to a completion certificate, so you can claim over multiple years. You can take 3 or 4 years to kind of develop a game and then release it. You could potentially wait if you want to get above the threshold and then release your game at that point, so that you can then claim the digital games tax offset. Penny's probably going to unmute and go, "My God, that's tax fraud," but it's not. So we'll just say.
Is it tax fraud?
No, it's not.
No, okay.
He just thinks I'm no fun.
It's just basically, it's really, it's kind of an important point about, obviously the threshold is there for a purpose. It is there to guarantee a certain level of activity before the game is actually, before we make a payment under the rebate. But it's up to you as to how long you take to develop the game and how much expense you incur before you say, okay, that's ready to release to the public. I've now released it. I will now make a claim under the completion certificate, and then go into the ongoing development cycle from that point.
And this is the kind of thing that, obviously we can't give tax advice, we can't give business advice, we can't give legal advice, but we are more than happy to chat to folks about their individual circumstances. We obviously understand the legislation. We understand, the nuance between the certificate types and the different sort of thresholds or line in the sand when you move from one certificate to the other. And we're always happy to chat through individual company or individual game circumstances to help a company identify whether there's opportunities to maximize their ability to access the offset.
Excellent. Thank you. So another question here. When do applications close for relevant financial years?
They don't. So basically, they don't close for relevant financial years. You can claim under the digital tax offset at any point for a financial year, given the fact that you may need to amend your tax return for that financial year into the future. But yeah, generally you can apply at any point in time for activity in a financial year.
All right, excellent. Go for it. Okay, so we have another question here regarding a job title. We understand that producers fall under the project manager's eligible expenditure. What if a person has the title of publishing producer? Would this be excluded because of marketing?
Look, that's a really good question. And, for anyone who's enjoyed browsing the legislation, because it's a great read, there are obviously some really specific job titles that are included, and there are some titles and areas that are excluded, and marketing is one of the areas that is excluded. I think for the purpose of the DGTO, we don't want to get too lost in semantics. Obviously, a job title is just a job title, and I think what is important is the type of work and whether the type of work is eligible. So if you have a, someone who has maybe a slightly unusual job title, or a job title that you think might be a bit misleading or doesn't necessarily reflect what they do in the DGTO context, claim for them, but provide additional documentation that evidences what they do and why it's DGTO eligible.
Excellent advice. At the end of the day, it's just a label, an important one, but let's interrogate it a bit further. All right. Can we apply for multiple completion certificates in a financial year? For example, when we're working on multiple projects at once.
Yes, you can. So you can apply for multiple projects. You can apply for multiple completion certificates subject to the caps. So the cap obviously is 20 million per income year for a group or for a company or group of companies. So long as you're within those thresholds, and each completion certificate is above the minimum thresholds, meets all of the other eligibility criteria, then there's nothing to stop you to apply for multiple completion certificates from one company in the year.
Excellent. We have a question here regarding Jira tickets. Can they be used instead of timesheets to work out the time spent on the project? So Jira is a, project tracking software.
Glad you explained that to me, Jens, because I never heard of it. I don't know if Penny has heard of it, but look, like again, we can't really comment on specific software or specific kind of applications that might be used, but please reach out and contact us, and we could probably, kind of work through what you're trying to achieve.
All right. Last question for now. Anyway, can we just confirm that the $500,000 could apply for multiple projects/games under the same company?
So it depends what certificate you are applying for. Okay, so if you're applying for a completion certificate, you must have incurred 500,000 on one game, the game that you've released. Okay, and you can then, as a company, apply for multiple projects for a completion certificate above that threshold. Okay, if you're going for an ongoing development, you can do a slate of games, which equals anything above 500,000 threshold. So hopefully that's understandable. So if you're doing ongoing development on, say, 5 games, and you've incurred 150,000 per game, then you would apply for an ongoing development certificate of 750,000. Okay, so it really depends on the certificate that you're going for and the point in time at which you're going for. For completion certificates, it's an individual certificate for the individual project that's just been released, and that must meet that $500,000 threshold, but there's no limit to how many certificates you apply for. The ongoing development certificate, normally you just apply for one certificate in one financial year, but you would then include as many projects as you're working on within that ongoing development certificate. But again, it must meet the 500,000 minimum threshold. Hopefully that's clear.
Thank you, Jason. Look, that's it for questions, seemingly, unless anyone in the audience says, there we go. Excellent. Thank you very much, anonymous attendee. Sorry if this has already been explained. Can I apply for 5 completion certificates across 5 games that I completed? $100,000 Kuwait on each of those games, equaling 500,000 Kuwait altogether. Would this still be eligible as it meets the $500,000 threshold?
Unfortunately not, because the completion certificate, as I've outlined, is $500,000 per game, per certificate. Okay, so a completion certificate is very much. If you're doing ongoing development on those 5 games in a single year and apply for an ongoing development, then you would meet the threshold and you would be able to apply. But if it's first release games, then you'd apply for the completion certificate and you would need to meet the 500K threshold for each and every single game.
Great, thank you very much for making that clear. Any more questions? Here is your last opportunity. Look, if there are no further questions, then I think let's wrap this up. I would really like to thank Jason and Penny for again making themselves available for this really, really valuable check-in. Maybe we can do that again in a couple of months' time, maybe around sort of the July mark, because then it's been going for about a year and can see how things are going. If you have any questions in the meantime, please reach out to both Penny and Jason. As you can see, they really are very friendly people. If you don't know where to find them, feel also free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to pass on any questions on your behalf. And again, same with any feedback that you may have on this mechanism. If there are a couple of things that you feel work or don't work, by all means, please reach out. We'd be very happy to communicate that on your behalf. Look, Jason, Penny, thank you very much for making yourself available. 27 answered questions, not too bad for a Wednesday afternoon before Christmas. So well done. Thank you very much.
No, not bad. And look, thank you to you guys for hosting us as well. We're always happy to give out the information that you need. And like you said, please contact us if you've got any doubts or any questions.
That's it. Well, look, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for dialing in. And have a good rest of the week. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye now.